All right, so for this game, we have a couple of things going on. So first of all, we have a 4-day period. So there's definitely a sequential component that we have to deal with. And for those 4 days, we're going to have to figure out two things. For each one of those days, we have to figure out who's going to be interviewed, the witness, and who the investigator is going to be. Now, in terms of the base setup, as usual, since we have a sequential component, we're going to let the sequencing drive the chart. So we're going to have just our positions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then from there, we are going to set up two tiers to keep track of the two different components, that is the witness and the investigators. Now, the witnesses themselves happen to be F, G, H, I, so that's easygoing enough. There are 4 witnesses for 4 days, and the investigators are Q, R, and S, which throws a minor kind of curveball here because that means that there's only 3 people. Now, we're told that each of the investigators will show up, but that means that one of those investigators is going to go a second time. There is going to be a duplicate of one of these 3 investigators. Next, the rules themselves. So the first rule tells us that G and H must be interviewed by the same investigator. So that's actually pretty good. I guess we can kind of say that G and H are going to have the same person investigate them. So whoever that double investigator is, they're going to have to cover both G and H. Next, G and I cannot be consecutive, so I guess we can say that G and I simply cannot be next to each other in either direction. Next, Q has to interview F. So that's actually kind of good because if we know that Q has to be interviewed by F, that means that this person cannot possibly be Q. Because, well, Q is busy with F and we only get one duplicate, right? Which means that essentially the person who's going to interview G and H is going to have to either be R or S. Lastly, we are told that R has to do the third interview, which is so close to giving us a good piece of information. But unfortunately, we don't know that R is going to be the double, right? In other words, R could be the one that interviews G and H, or alternatively not. Although we only have one other option. If R is not the double, then he's going to be interviewing I for sure. So we know that if R is the duplicate, then this is going to be either G or H, but if he's not the duplicate, it's going to be I. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's anything we can really latch onto in terms of exhausting this game, so we're just going to go straight into the questions themselves. So question number 13 asks, which of the following could be the schedule of the interviews 1st through 4th? And they do give us both the interviewers and the interviewees. So let's go through the rules. So the first rule tells us that G and H have to have the same person interviewing them. So answer choice A looks good because R does both of those interviews. B looks okay because R does both of those interviews. C looks okay because R does both G and H as well. Actually, no, that's not true. Looks like for answer choice C, S does H, and then R interviews G. So that doesn't work. We can disqualify answer choice C from the answers. Answer choice D has S interviewing both G and H, so we're good. And answer choice E has R interview both H and G, so we're good. Next. The second rule told us that G and I cannot be consecutive, so let's take a look. Answer choice A, I is first with H second, so we're fine. Answer choice B, you'll notice that I is second and G is third, and that certainly wouldn't work, so we can disqualify B from the answers. Answer choice C has I first with F second, we're good. D has, who do we have? G first and H second, so we're fine. And E has I first and F second, so we're fine. Next, Q must be the interviewer for F. Let's take a look. Answer choice A has Q interviewing I and definitely not F, so answer choice A is out. Answer choice D has Q interviews F, we're good. Answer choice E has Q interviews F, we're good. Lastly, R has to do the third interview, so between answer choices D and E, for D, you'll notice Q is doing the third interview, so we can disqualify that one, and E looks okay on that count. So the best answer to question number 13 then becomes answer choice E. Next, question number 14 rather, is our first local question. So let's see what we can do. If R interviews I, well, first of all, we know R goes into the third position, except moreover, if R is interviewing I, that means that R cannot be our duplicate, right? Because the duplicate has to interview G and H, which means that if R does I, that means that there's only one R, and that goes into the third position. So that's taken care of. Moreover, we know though that I and G are not on friendly terms, so G cannot be next to I, which means G now gets stuck in the first position. And we know that since R is not going to be the one that's doubled up, the one that's doubled up is left to be S because Q is always out of the question. So let's take a look. We can say that G is going to have to be interviewed by S. Actually, this rule over here, we can probably rewrite that. That should go the other way. So F is the witness that we're going to be interviewing, and Q is actually the investigator. Anyways, from this point forward, do we know much more? And we don't. The thing is, the FQ block could either go here or it could go there, so we have a little bit more flexibility. Let's see what we can do with the question itself. The question asks, which of the following must be true? A, F is interviewed first. Well, that definitely not only doesn't have to be true, that can't happen because currently G is first, so answer choice A is out. Next, answer choice B, G is interviewed first. Well, actually, yeah, there it is. G definitely has to currently be interviewed first. Best answer to number 14 is answer choice B. Next, number 15 is global. We'll come back to that one. Let's take a look at number 16. So we have, if S does the fourth interview, well, I guess the question is, what can we do with that information? So if S is the fourth interview, so this gets a little sticky because we still don't know whether R or S is doing the double interview, right? In other words, it could still be R who's responsible for G and H, and S then would have to be responsible for I, or vice versa. That said, though, we could kind of play out both of these possibilities. Because, well, I mean, first of all, we definitely know that F is going to have to go somewhere in positions 1 or 2 with Q. But in terms of S and R, I guess we can play out the two possibilities. The two possibilities here are either R is responsible for the double or S is responsible for the double. Now, in those two scenarios, if R is going to be the one who's responsible for the double, then R is going to have to do I. And if S is the one who is responsible for the double, then S is going to have to do I. So those are our only two plays here. Now, in the top scenario, this is a lot more restricted because now we can say that if I is in 3, this is very similar to the previous scenario. So now we know that G is going to have to go into the first position alongside S because G can't be next to I. And moreover, we know that F is going to have to go into the second position with Q, and then H is left with S, which makes sense because G and H have the same investigator. Now, in the second scenario, if we happen to have I as I with S, that means that R gets the double investigation. The thing is, though, this right here can't be G, but if R is doing the double investigation, he has to do one of G or H, which means that this now ends up having to be H. Now, the first two positions we're a little bit more flexible on because FQ can go into either position, and then G with R can go into either position, so we can leave it wide open. So the question now asks, which of the following could be true? Answer choice A, F is interviewed first. Well, in the second scenario, we arguably could have had F go first, so that actually seems viable. Let's take a look at the other ones. B, G is third. Well, no, we said that G certainly can't go third because either it's going to be I or it's going to be H there, so that's not going to fly. G is fourth. Nope, it's either H or I. Next, answer choice D, H is second. Now, actually, no, that doesn't work because either H is in fourth or H is in third. There's no scenario where H can go second. And lastly, I is first. Well, no, I, you'll notice, is either in 3 or in 4. So the best answer choice to question number 15 then, not 15, rather 16, becomes A. Next, so number 17 looks like a local, but it actually is a global question, so the rest of these are global. We'll come back to these in a moment. Let's take a look at question number 15, which was our first global question. Which of the following could be true? So what could happen? Answer choice A, Q conducts the first and the second interviews. Well, the thing is, we know that Q is only going to go once because Q interviews F. So Q certainly can't do the first and the second interviews. B, Q does the first and the fourth, same problem. Q is restricted to only one interview. C, R does the second and the fourth interviews. Well, the thing is, R could be your double investigator, but he's definitely third, so he'll never go into 2 and 4 because one of his investigations would have to be in 3, so C is out. Answer choice D, S does 1 and 2, and actually, maybe, because arguably speaking, for example, in this scenario, we could have had S here with H, and then F would have gone into Q with Q on number 4. So that seems like it would be viable. Just in case, let's take a look at E. Shaw conducts 2 and 4. Well, that actually seems like it might be viable as well. The thing is, though, if we place Shaw into 2 and 4, that means that the people who will have to go into 2 and 4 are G and H one way or the other. But that means that F, who has to be interviewed by Q, can't go third, so F will go into number 1. But that means that I ends up in number 3. Now, no matter which way the GH went between 2 and 4, G would end up next to I in number 3, and that wouldn't work. So that would disqualify answer choice E, leaving us with answer choice D to be the best answer for question number 15. Next, question number 17. F must be interviewed fourth if which of the following is true. Now, it's worth recognizing this question is not asking you what would happen if F was fourth. Rather, it's inverted. The question is rather asking you what would force F to go into the fourth position. So that's why this is a global question. We're not given an additional restriction. Rather, we're looking for something that would force F to go into number 4. Let's take a look. Answer choice A, G is interviewed first. Now, you'll notice that we've actually had a number of scenarios where G went first, and in both of these scenarios, F didn't have to go into the 4th position. So that means that this certainly would not force F to go 4th. Next, H is interviewed second. Now, we haven't seen that quite happen yet, but let's see what would happen if that were true. Arguably, if H goes second, what does that tell us? Well, F at this point certainly could not go third. He maybe could go 4th, but does he have to go 4th? Because, I mean, the alternative is for F to then go first. Except, wait a minute. If H happens to go second, and then F is the one who goes first, who does that leave us with? That would leave us with G and I, who are going to have to go into 3 and 4, which means, wait a minute, that doesn't work, right? If H goes second, there's no way to put F into 1 because G and I would be next to each other in 3 and 4, which means that if H goes second, F can't go first, he can't go third either because he has to be interviewed by Q. That means that F would have to go into the 4th position. So answer choice B is actually a very viable answer. Just in case though, let's take a look at the other ones. Answer choice C, H goes third. Well, the thing is, we've seen a scenario where H was third and F certainly didn't have to go 4th. So that would disqualify C. Answer choice D, I is first. Well, we haven't quite seen that yet. Now, if I was to go first, hypothetically, wouldn't that allow, for example, couldn't we do F in the 2nd position, and then G and H would just go 3 and 4? I mean, as long as G is not next to I, that seems very safe. So that doesn't seem like it would force the F to go into the 4th position. And lastly, I is second. Well, if we place, actually that wouldn't work at all, because if we place I in second, that would force G to go 4th, which means F certainly wouldn't go 4th. So answer choice E is also out. The best answer to number 17 becomes B. Lastly, number 18, any of the following could be true except. So we're looking for the one answer choice that cannot possibly be true. A, F is the day before G. So could we ever have F immediately before G? Well, so far, it doesn't look like we've seen that happen, but, I mean, in the last scenario, wasn't this very plausible? I mean, we left it open because the F and the G could have swapped places, right? But couldn't we easily do F over here and G over here, and then I is away from G, so we're fine, in which case it looks like that could potentially happen. We could have F immediately before G, so we can get rid of answer choice A. Next, answer choice B. F is the day before H. So could we have F immediately before H? Actually, the same scenario right here. Couldn't we have had F in 2 and then H in 3 and then G would have gone into 1? Yeah, that seems very plausible. So answer choice B is out. Answer choice C. G is interviewed the day before H. Could we have G immediately before H? Actually, the exact same scenario once again. We could have easily had F go into 1 and then G go into 2 and then H is in 3. So we could easily do G the day before H. So that disqualifies answer choice C. Next, D, H is immediately before F. Could we have H right before F? Now, we haven't seen that happen yet. So let's kind of just play it out. We don't really have an opportunity for that here yet. So if we have H immediately before F, well, we know F could never go third. So that wouldn't, I mean, F certainly wouldn't work. But then wait a minute. If F can't go into the third position, that means that the HF block would never go into 2 and 3 respectively. But if it can't go into 2 and 3, that means that it would either go into 1 and 2, but that would leave G and I next to each other, which doesn't work. Or alternatively, it would leave H and F in 3 and 4, same thing, then G and I are stuck in 1 and 2 next to each other. In other words, that actually could never work. H, it looks like, could never go immediately before F. D is viable. Just in case, let's take a look at E. I is immediately before H. Now this one we've actually explicitly seen happen right here. We definitely could have I right before H, so that would disqualify answer choice E, and thereby leave us with D, as the right answer choice for question number 18.